Good evening. It's about 5:43 or so on September 30th, and this is a meeting of the Finance Committee for the Concord School District. The members that we have here from the committee, and we have a little bit of a technical difficulty, so we're sort of lumbering through that a little bit. We are on streaming live on the Concord Educational TV channel, and one of our committee members, Dave Parker, is also doing that as well. In the room, I have obviously myself, Liza Poinier, and Jim Richards, and we have a special cameo appearance for guest Clint Cogswell, who is our district treasurer, as well as our business administrator Jack Dunn and our superintendent Kathleen Murphy. Our agenda for tonight, this is sort of an annual finance committee meeting where we talk about the history of our meetings that we've had, our budget finalization. We're going to talk about a review of the fiscal year 20 budget, a review of the 21 budget and recommendations. That will be exciting given what we've been going through. Fiscal year 22 considerations. Jack Dunn, our business administrator for all the years I've known him, has always looked out a couple of years in advance, thank goodness. And then, if required, we'll have a motion in upcoming important meetings. And I don't think I'm going to need to add a person on because we do have Mr. Parker, who is somewhat remote. So I think we'll be all set. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jack, at this point, and thank you.
No problem. Okay, for the committee members and any board members on, this is where you can locate these paper handouts that you have in front of you and this presentation that's on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
There is a list of all the committee members, as Tom had alluded to. And then, again, the agenda for tonight, Tom went over. And I'm going to get started and go right into it. So the first thing is the history of meetings. As you could see, since 2012, 2013, which was my first one, these are each of the meetings that we've done this annually, where we have a finance committee. We kind of talk about the current budget, the one that closed, the current one, and kind of look a little bit into the future and start to set those dates of where we do, where we're going to finalize for the year. If you remember, we'll get the valuation from the city in the month of October, and that'll give an opportunity to look at the budget depending on what that valuation looks like and finalize the budget, because that's going to ultimately give them the information for the Department of Revenue to set the tax rate. Okay? So.
Jack, can you raise the camera? I can't see the screen.
Yep, sure. Oh, hold on, David. If you're on through this, I apologize. 1 second. Let me do this. I can at least help you there. I wasn't thinking. Might as well just share my screen.
Did I mention Gina?
Yep.
Because I thought she went away.
She's still there.
I want to mention that she's here.
Is that better now, David?
Thank you, that's good. Yeah, that's good, thank you.
How about now? Is it still showing?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's good.
All right, excellent. All right. You're welcome. No problem. Sorry I didn't do that. All right, so first thing is the FY20 budget. So this was the budget that was approved and passed last October 28th. And in front of you is a handout. For those that's following along through the file, it's the next page. There's an orange handout that is a summary of the revenue and the expenses for the FY20 budget. As we mentioned to you, and I'll get into this in a moment, we had anticipated that the FY20 budget was going to have more potential revenue, but more savings and expenditures than not because of the shutdown after March 13th. So you can see a lot of the lines here on the expense and the revenue side are either positive, or if they're negative, it's because we either fell short, or when you look at other, we didn't take the withdrawal from the trusts because we didn't need it, because it would have created excess money. So specifically, you see the special education trust fund and the instructional trust. You see those as shortfalls. It's because we didn't need to bring that revenue in to offset those expenditures. Okay. So in the end, well, I'm going to go to the next slide unless there's questions about this. So if you take a look, we had estimated when we started the shutdown, I think it was June 11th, we estimated that the year end would have an unassigned fund balance of about 3.5 to 4 million. Okay, and we only needed 2.1 to carry over to the next year's budget. The actual budget came in at 4,249,680.45. That's how much was left over between expenditures and revenues. As I mentioned, we needed 2.1 million. The board voted on June 25th to give the administration authority to start moving the money into the trust funds, and I'll show you where they all. This shows you where they all went, and I'll discuss some of the logic that we did behind that. And we moved a little over 2.1 million into the reserves for the purposes of trying to brunt this school year, not knowing what could happen, and potentially the year after that. Try to put this away and let it out slow. Because if you were to give all this back in 1 year, you'd probably be looking at about a 3.5% decrease, but it's one-time money. And the issue is, as soon as you operate normally, you're going to shoot right back up because a lot of these are fixed expenses. Okay? So the purpose was to try to create a balance so we don't need heart monitors all around the city because the tax rate's starting to go wobbly. So the logic in the instructional trust is wherever we saw savings in salary lines that were tied to educators, or supplies, we put into the instructional trust. If there were savings in benefits, the risk management, like in health, that was over. Dental, we expected to run negative. It wound up having a positive savings because we had the stay-at-home order. We put that money into the risk reserve. For the energy, where we didn't use as much of the buildings, whether it was electricity or natural gas, we put that into the energy reserve. For any technology expenditures that we wound up not making, or leftover funds, because remember we did the big phone upgrade, that went into the technology trust fund. Anything that had to do with any building maintenance that we didn't need to do, any service calls that didn't come in because the buildings were not as active, we put into the building and maintenance trust fund. And also any salaries that may have been saved and overtime, we moved that money over. And then obviously special ed, if there was any out-of-district placements, any transportation costs that were saved that we didn't have to commute for out-of-district, that's where that funds came from. So the total was $2,146,355 that we moved into the trust funds. So what I show you here on this slide is how much the balance was, how much it was once we did those transfers, and what those balances roughly are now, because there's interest every month, although it's peanuts. It's something. So that puts you in a position now that when you see what's happening in the 21 budget and potentially in the 22, how do we start letting that back out so that we smooth the tax rate? Specifically, we would target things that are all one-offs, not anything that would be necessarily operating. I'll give you an example. You're going to see shortly in the sheets that I handed out, we're projecting a shortage in natural gas. You have an energy risk reserve. Now, you might say, why are we projecting a shortage? As Matt told you, we're running the buildings at 100% natural fresh air. That means these systems are going to run more. So I'm expecting electricity to tweak a little bit, but the heating, once we get into cold and we're starting to pull that fresh air, we're going to have to condition, and I think the heat's going to run more. That's why we're going to see that. But right now, hopefully, I'd hope we'd be done with this by now with this whole COVID thing, but hopefully by next year, we normalize. Good, Tom.
So, Jack, it's important for me to say this because I don't have too many more opportunities to say this, that movement of this type of money, this $2.1 million is not hocus pocus. It's not something that this board or this administration does because we like to take the taxpayers' money and hide it away in various trusts. It's because we do, every year, try to keep the tax rate for our taxpayers in a sort of a flat line, so that if expenses go up, we don't have to have a bump in our tax rate. So anyone who is interested, probably Betty Hoadley and others, will know that our tax rate over the last 8 or 9 years has stayed at a pretty good clip, pretty evenly all the way along. And that's why we do this. It's not for any other reason than put away some money for a rainy day, and the rainy days come and we take it back. Thank you.
And as you can see, that ending balance, you have almost $5 million in there. And notice I did not put any money into the Facilities and Renovation Trust Fund. That's already earmarked at 5% of the budget. That's geared for a project in the future. We did not feel that we could take that money and add any more to it. That is stable, and that's to handle your long-term debt. This is how do we stabilize the operating, which is the one I'm very concerned about, is the overall operating budget. Okay? Go ahead, Liz.
Jack, you've mentioned that the interest on this money is peanuts. Are there options to make more? Because $5 million is a pretty decent amount of money, and I'm wondering, I expect that we are pretty limited in investments we can make because of the nature of the money and the district, but is there anything else we can do?
So when I get to this revenue report that I highlight in yellow, I'm going to show you specifically earnings on investments. One of the things we did last year that we had been confident, because at the time the rate was about 2.37% on our money. On our checking account, we earned 0.1%. So we had that in there. The problem is that has dropped because of the economy to 0.47 on those investment funds. So that's why you're going to see a significant decrease. When we had projected about 125,000, now we're down to about 30,000, maybe even 15. I think I dropped it to 15,000. That's what I mean. As far as I'm concerned, where we were at 2.37 down to 0.47 is peanuts, but it's not sitting in the checking or your Facilities and Renovation Trust Fund money. So there's approximately $10 million that's sitting over there into a risk pool that the city is also a part of that pool.
Got it.
I had spoke with their treasurer before he left. He had recommended that. We went through that process and started using that to try to earn more money.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, I'll move on to the Food Service Fund. One of the things that is in all of this calculation, what you're seeing here is a snapshot of the general fund. But the Food Service Fund is supposed to be an independent fund and is basically made up of all the salaries for the employees, and then what helps offset that is income from the sale of food and reimbursements from the state and federal government, mostly the federal government. So when we shut down, the food program had a deficit of $283,435. Now, as you know, we continued to run the food service program in a remote environment. We put them on buses. We had about 9 workers that consistently came in for those 58 days and helped do that. But you're going to see a slide in here, short coming up, that shows you what those meal runs are versus what they are when they're in the school. It's significant. So the program's just not able to handle itself. Fortunately, if you remember, and you'll see in this budget, we've been putting about $50,000 away into that fund, regardless of whether it needs it, number one. 2, the program the last couple of years has made a little over 20 grand, which is the first time that's happened since I've been here. We've been keeping it all there. That's the 208,000. So the nice part, again, you save for the rainy day fund. We use that to we tried to offset as much as we could of that 283. So that left $75,000 deficit, okay? Now, the other unfortunate piece is those that, all the staff that were out those months, we paid everybody till June. We satisfied the contracts. So the food service workers that did not work in the program, for whatever reason it may be, we are not allowed to charge them to the food service fund. That was to the tune of $123,243.28. We had to move what their pay was over, we had to be offset by the general fund, so we had to transfer those funds over. Then you also had student negative balances. That was upwards of almost 18,000. If you remember, we came and you acknowledged at your monthly board meeting, we had one in particular donor that donated $15,000, and then there were a number of other supplemental generous donations. So otherwise that number would have been bigger, but we had to offset 1,800. So when you net all that out, the program has a positive balance right now of $50,000.
Wow.
Okay? But there's a lot of support from the general fund. But at least over the last couple of years, we've been kind of saving. Otherwise, you would have picked up that whole 283, plus you would have had to transfer that 123.
So Jack, just to clear my little brain of its cloudiness, the amount of negative balance at the end of the year in student accounts was over $16,000, but it was offset by those donations, bringing that total down to $1,827.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Are those one-time funds,
Yeah.
that donation? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we'll take it.
Yep.
And very happily.
I think the board got a lot of positive press in us keeping the food program going. When, you know, we took advantage of the fact that we have our own transportation system, which is fortunate. We had staff there, I think it was 11 there that wanted to work, or were able to work, I should say. And they went out and helped those food service workers deliver. And we tried to keep some semblance of a program and keep those kids fed.
And that's the big deal. I'm sorry, Liza.
Oh, it's fine.
It's just, not only did we get the positive press, but we probably literally saved some moms and dads a ton of anxiety about how they were going to orchestrate keeping their kids at home, trying to work, trying to feed them. You know, thank goodness for our Concord School District for that particular piece. Liza?
Thanks. Two questions. One, is the online donation link still live and available if people want to continue to give? And for the school year that we're in now, I expect that we'll have the same situation with the staffing monies.
Well, right now they're all working. They are all working.
Okay, great.
They are going out on buses every day. They are also feeding the kids that are in school, and there's pickups at the school.
Okay,
Versus when you had a stay-at-home order,
got it.
no buildings, no kids, they're shut down. The only work you really had was remote.
Right.
And then you had some that either had a condition where they couldn't work, or you know, we didn't need it, and we didn't want to see them harmed.
That makes sense. Thank you.
So Jack, following on Liza's question is, we kept things going last year by using our $208,000 of savings that we'd saved for 4 years, but now that's gone. And we transferred $123,000 from this fund and picked it up in our general fund. So we basically paid that out of what we normally would operate schools with. You know, we ended up, and I'm so grateful for the donors and the people who helped our students who couldn't pay their outstanding balances. That was extremely generous and speaks volumes to the Concord community. But I'm glad to hear that people are working and getting paid accordingly, but I gotta ask you what our losses are gonna be, because we don't have the $208,000 rainy day fund around anymore. What's gonna happen in this coming school year?
So you're going to see in a couple of slides.
Okay,
I'm
sorry,
trying to.
you read
No, that's
ahead,
okay.
sorry.
That's all right. But the show, I'm going to show you October of 2019 when you have a functioning school and how many meals we do. I'm going to show you last May a snapshot of what we were doing for meals and what we've done up till September 25th in meals. And now what we're going to start doing, we need a little bit more data to try to start doing a run out, because this whole system's going to start flipping on the 5th, because now you have K1, 6th, and 9th. As soon as they come into the schools, then we're going to be remote meals and in-school meals are gonna pick up. We definitely anticipate that going up. The other piece we did with the food services, if someone either left or we had an open position, we didn't fill it, and we've consolidated kitchens. So there's total, including the director and everybody, 32 staff members that run that program, and we're down 6 right now. And that's our plan, is to run like that to the best that we can. Everything is pre-packaged. We have another packaging machine on order, as you can imagine. That stuff is back ordered as well. And unfortunately, the cost of supplies are pretty decent. So we're doing the best we can. But go ahead, Tom.
So are we ready to move on to the next slide? Pretty close?
Yep.
Before we do, I just need to, I made a mistake at the beginning of the meeting, and I didn't recognize Gina Cannon, who is one of our board members who's on board with us. I think I got thrown off by the fact that we couldn't hear her and she was going to do something else. But she is here, she's with us, and so thank you, Gina, for attending.
Okay.
Not easy to attend all these meetings all the time.
So that's the FY20 budget. Now I'm going to move on to FY21, which is your current budget that started July 1. So this is a summary of the budget that you passed on April 13th. As you remember, we got kicked out on the 13th. We were scheduled to pass a budget at the end of March, and we had some delays in trying to get there. So ultimately, you passed the budget on the 13th. And I'm going to move to the next slide, and I'm going to go through some of the key components that we're going to keep an eye on. If you take a look at the first handout, which is should be the one that says expense and revenue draft up top, and this one is about a 5-page document. Sorry for the small font, for those that may have some trouble. But this is everything that's grouped up by object. And these objects are created by a fiscal manual that is produced by the state. And if I were to expand this thing would probably be about that thick, because it would show all 16,000 accounts. All right, this thing's just all crunched up. But what I do is I've just highlighted in yellow. You'll notice you see salaries. We're going to keep an eye on everything there. Under the benefits, you noticed I highlighted the dental insurance. Right now, if you look at these columns, you see budget, you see actual what we have spent, cut checks for. You see the encumbrances. This is stuff that we have it's already spoken for. And these encumbrances can change based on payroll, based on people working. Then you see requisitions. These are requests to take some of the budget money that haven't been approved yet. And then you see, based on what is actual, encumbered, and in a requisition form, that gives me a projection. And that tells me how much is left, what I'm projected to use of that money. And then it tells me how much is remaining. And then it tells me the percentage that's been used and what percentage is remaining. This is something I developed when I came here, and it's linked to our financial system. I hit a button, and it tells me instantly where everything sits. So this is how I use throughout the year, me and the business manager going through to look at these things. So I'm going to just go on a little bit more, and if there's any questions you have on any of these, by any means, whether it's this meeting or you could take it home with you and go through it if you have questions. But, as you keep an eye on the almanac, and, I put my little slide in the budget about, people freezing or cold babies or something. I am going to highlight that only because they're talking about cold and wet, wintry weather. Let's see what happens there. If I move on to page 3 of 5, you see data communications and postage fees. We are doing a lot of mailing. And on the data communications, we're trying to do some support for some youngsters, whether it's through cell or hotspots. You can see right now there's no money remaining, and it says projected 26,400. That's because we've encumbered everything at this point. But if in fact it starts going over, I will need to start increasing that line. But that's what I'm keeping an eye on. When you go to the postage fees, as I mentioned, we're doing a lot of mailings, getting things home to parents, but we're also using a lot through our courier and the bus system to deliver things as well. If you move down to the 660,000 series or 66 series, supplies, books, and utilities. That's where you could see natural gas, see the negative 138,000. That's where that projection is. That's the one that has me a little concerned, but I'm also confident. I think I've mentioned you before. 21, I've always felt we can get through. It's 22. If this stays longer, it's going to be real tough, and you're going to see some of that outlook. But you have trust funds.
Yeah.
You've put money away. Yep. Is that David?
Yeah, is that, I'm just getting, one screen.
One screen? Oh,
The
okay.
finance com-
It's because, hold on one second. Let me do this, David. It's because I have I have a handout. Sorry. If you, let me do this.
That's okay.
No, that's
I'll
all right.
read it.
Let me just load up my, this should load up any second. It's just loading. It's a big file. And then I'll switch back to the presentation. Okay. Do you see it now, David?
That's good, Jack, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to scroll down to the supplies, which is where I was leaving off. But this is also in the in your committee folder as well, all in that one packet. But as I look at the energy for natural gas, that's the big number that I'm talking about. It might be a little small for you. But for right now, for the electricity, we budgeted 971,000. We think that's a couple 100,000 in your energy risk reserve, and if we need to touch that, we will. We'll come to you for that. We can't go to it, as we mentioned to you. Hold on one second. Let me try to bring this back up for them. I think that's it on the expenditure side. I think what I'm going to do is move over to the revenue. Any questions on this at the moment?
So Jack, we're all set with networking equipment. I mean, we've gone over the first hump probably, and we have computers enough, and we have bandwidth enough, and I'm probably saying things that are 25
Well, one of the
years
things we
old.
did do, and we used the CARES funds to do it, we jumped from a 1 gigabyte pipe to almost a 4 or 5 gig. So it doubled the price from $1,300 a month to $2,600 a month.
Mhm.
But what I did is I took that differential for the contract for the year funds, about the $800,000 that we have,
Okay,
and that's where I stuck it. In anticipation, we'll bring it back down because staff is concerned about all the remote learning having enough bandwidth. So we upped that pipe. So
so we all look to the future for answers to questions we have and worries that we have. Would that be something that you'd project that in a year, if COVID is a thing of the past, and I hope it is, that we would be able to go back to a lesser amount?
that would be my hope that we could. It'll depend on how many people are remote, how many people work in the buildings, and all of a sudden we use like a Wii Video or these various streaming services, and they realize, oh, it's been so much better having this, But on
Yeah,
the flip
that
side,
happens a lot.
it
right?
does.
I mean,
It's kind of like you upgrade your car to the next level, and then you try to go back. I'm not going to get leather this time. It doesn't
Yeah.
work out. So that could be it. The other piece is, as that increases, our E-rate reimbursement increases. So there'll
Okay.
be some offset for that.
so E-rate's still around. That's
Yes,
nice.
that is. We just filed that paperwork today. So just give me a
Thank you.
minute to try to get this back from current slide. So I'm going to go back to my slide. Let me just share
Make
this.
a comment.
Yeah.
Just in response to your thought on that issue, Tom, I'm working with local superintendents, and I have a sort of encapsulated what the needs we've had in the district relative to the pandemic and what our future needs are, and where I anticipate, of course, working with Jack, and we're sharing that with Senator Khan and Representative Myla, who
Okay.
are holding hearings to help school districts meet the needs of those things that we're gonna continue to need,
So-
and not have to just totally impact the CARES money. Hopefully there'll be some new money, and or the operational budget.
Kathleen, does that include more than just technology?
Oh, yeah, it
Like-
includes the monies, for food service. I have a whole list of items that we
Beautiful.
spent, any extra money on EPP, EPPE, along with the air quality study that Matt did, that
Mhm.
was, that cost us some bucks. Anything like that, so that they could see where we were spending the money and where we're gonna continue to need to spend the money, especially as you, evaluate all the systems, so.
Great, thank you.
Just trying to get our word to the folks that make those decisions.
So right now, most of those supplies for that PPE, and I gotta try to get this presentation back up there for a minute. I might need you to pause for a second, Josh, just so I can not let me do my thing here. Sorry, 1 second, because I didn't used to see the screen. Oh, I already had it open. Silly me. I might need to pause a minute so I can clear this thing out, all right? Just give me a second.
Thank you.
Josh, can you just pause for like station identification or something?
A word from our sponsor?
Yeah, a word from our sponsor. I just want to, oh, there we go. Nope, that isn't it. Hang on a second.
Well, we're not live,
I don't know. He's probably in there listening. And I know, I think Gina has a question, but, Gina, if you can hear me, go ahead and ask your question while I'm trying to fiddle with this thing.
She just texted me, let me respond here.
It's trying, see what happens is I got a little screen that's trying to connect to that and it's just running. Just tell her I'm gonna log back in. I'm gonna kick her off for a second. Hold on 1 second. I'll jump right back on.
Let's budget for a new connection for you.
Yeah.
Well, you know, what? That's wireless for you, right?
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second.
We do that, like work-wise, we have issues with, you just pick
That's the
up.
second time that's done it here. I've never had that problem though with the,
Huh.
you know why? Because I'm hardwired in. It doesn't go through the, had that problem up with this
So,
thing. I'll
so
hardwire
when
it.
we can, Gina does have a question.
Yep. I'm just gonna reboot this thing and come right back in. But I don't wanna sit there and not have it on there.
we're gonna lose 2 people of this committee
Mhm.
for the budget season.
Yep.
A lot of experience leaving.
Maybe I'll come and sit in the peanut gallery.
With me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Liza, Clint, and Betty.
Pardon?
Is it Liza, Clint, and Betty in the front row?
Yeah.
I'll sit in the back and toss things.
Maybe I should rewrite my job description so that I do something.
So
You're
Jack,
supposed to be
she,
touring the, aren't you supposed to be touring like the country and national parks and stuff right now in this time?
I
That got on hold, huh?
No, well, yeah, but I have tickets to go to Hawaii in January, but I don't know whether they'll let us in. So, I have friends there. Last year we stayed there for 2 months.
Nice.
Oh.
That was a year ago already?
Yeah.
Retirement.
Oh, So Jack, she said, my question is this, just in case,
Mhm.
and it's a typical good question. Money that was moved over to, say, the Energy Trust Fund, we can't use to offset technology expenses, is that correct?
No, that's why you have a tech trust fund.
But I mean, we
Yeah.
can't just,
However, we can move things
I mean,
around funds.
You can, technically, as long as I have you vote, you could,
Is-
but
it-
that's not
for
what
a
it's-
vote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
but we
Yeah.
typically don't.
no. And you got some money saved in there, so, I think it's just coming up now. Let me see if
So
I can get this.
we need to ask that question when we're on television.
Yep.
Yeah.
to make sure.
Well, I think Gina will ask it when we
Let me
get
load up
back on.
my PowerPoint.
I was just playing Jenny for a minute there.
So Jack, we're back.
Okay, so you see
Good.
my screen,
Okay.
and I believe,
Yep, I can see your
David and Gina should see my screen too.
And can Gina hear you,
Gina, can you hear me?
or Dave?
Yeah. Also, we apologize to anybody watching for the delay, we had some technical issues.
I'm not hearing back from them.
They may need to reconnect.
Let me see if they, I'll hold until you tell me. I'm gonna get this hardwired.
Well, typically our Wi-Fi connection's really pretty good, but today we're just not having any.
Well, there's a device off of this. It's not the Wi-Fi, it's the little, there's a little dongle that goes off the
It's a
projector.
Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There she is. It's whether my settings are correct or not. Oh. Let's see if I can change my settings. USB, microphone. Yes, but can't something. Oh, that's why. There you go. Yes, but you can't hear me. I think I should be able to hear now. You can try now, Gina.
How about now?
Yep.
Very good.
All right.
Okay.
All right,
All
Gina.
right. Let me go
Gina,
back.
so,
Okay.
while we were
You
sort
did
of,
it. Yep. You should be good now too. Okay.
she can't, do
Thank you.
you wanna have Gina
Do you
ask
want me
her
to ask
question?
my question? Or
Yeah,
should I?
sure.
Yes.
Nope, go ahead.
Okay.
So I'm still new to all this budgeting process, and I wanted to ask that money that was moved into specifically earmarked trust. So is it correct, my understanding, that you can't say, take money out of the energy trust to pay for technology items?
We don't typically do it, but a board can go and do what it wants to do if it had to, but they're set up specific under RSA when you designed them, and there's verbiage that I put in the budget, in the back, in the appendix, that says what they are. But if there was ever a position, at least my conversations with the auditors, where there was something extreme, and we needed you to vote to do something, I would just make sure that that was all publicly documented, and there was a hearing, and all that happened. So say, for example, you created a trust fund that you no longer wanted to use anymore. Say the instructional trust, because it was used to buy books and things, and now you want to move it more towards technology. You could vote as a board and reprioritize or redo that, that expendable trust fund. So,
Okay,
stuff like that. But you do have a tech trust fund, so if we needed to buy stuff and we were running short, we'd come to you and explain that.
yeah,
So-
no, I
Yep.
I didn't know whether, for example, if the energy, need skyrocket and exceed what we have in, say, the energy trust, whether we could take money from a different earmarked trust to be able to pay those bills.
Sure. The other thing I've done in the past where I've looked at, say, for example, you have an employee that is on disability, and I know they're on there for that year, and then they're not going to be on for us. I've taken that expense out of your health risk reserve, so I freed up money in the general fund in order to buy it, because I used it for a legitimate purpose. That's what the health risk reserve was for. So we have a number of different levers that we can pull to be able to accommodate what you need without having to go to that extreme. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you for the explanation, Jack.
No problem. All right. So the other thing is under supplies that you don't see here, but as we run through this CARES fund, these CARES funds, and the PPE, you notice that is not a misprint. I do it 3 times because that is the big buzzword that I'm hearing, and that's when they seem to be weekly, the needs. So, and I have probably spent in the last 3 weeks almost $80,000. So, and we don't even have the kids back yet. So that's one of the things that I put on here because I'm concerned. Just the dollars.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the PPE and the CARES Act and the reversal about paying for PPE that
think this
we
is the
saw in the
FEMA grant?
paper?
The FEMA grant.
Yeah.
They reversed themselves from that. Yeah.
Oh, that wasn't CARES, that was
No,
FEMA.
It was FEMA.
So we were not counting on that money.
I've started moving what we bought in PPE over to there. One of the things that we did buy through there was $46,000 worth of floor scrubbers, the ride-on floor scrubbers, so that the staff could get the buildings cleaned faster.
Yeah.
So that is what I'm going to submit. That's one of the items. The other ones are the electrostatic guns, because that's
Yeah.
not PPE. But those things we're trying to see, and they pay 75% of that. We have to pay 25.
Okay,
Where it's just the CARES, that's an allocation of money, and you can use all of that.
okay,
So,
great.
but yeah,
thanks.
the FEMA's one's the one they've backed off, because originally it was, and we had it, but we're in the process of moving it over. That's what's making the money go faster now. So,
Thank you.
okay. So the other piece I had on there was negotiations. As I mentioned, we have 4 groups up this year, and there's a number of things we've talked to you about MOAs, memorandums of agreement. So will be that, and then any ongoing questions as it relates to your case. So they're the highlights on the expenditure side. On the revenue side, if you open up, if you look at the document in front of you that has, what I hand out, it says on top of it, it has a bunch of yellow lines. Sorry again for the small font. And let me try to, I'll try to put this a little bigger on the screen if I can. View, toolbar. So everything in yellow is tied to what's written in red there. So if you look at summer school academic, this is the stuff we collect locally. We didn't run a summer school, we ran an academic, but we did not charge for that. Because they were more concerned about getting the number of kids, because I think we had close to 600 kids that came in for summer school. There's also COTC summer camp, that did not run, so that zeroed out. The VOC students, we had budgeted 440 kids, we're at 395. So that's why we're seeing the decrease in the VOC ed. Preschool program is not open to regular education students, so there'll be no revenue from that. Bus passes, we're not charging for bus passes because that's going to be up and down throughout the year. Charter, we're also seeing $130,000 reduction in charter, and what that is there are things we contract either PTOs that paid for field trips or the grants. When we use our bus system, we have a fixed per mile cost that we charge the grants for. So we don't anticipate much of either 21C buses, the Title I. It's not going to be as if we were full throttle. So there's going to be that reduction. There's the earnings on investment I mentioned. So we had budgeted 125. We've knocked that down to 15,000. Because again, that was about 2.37%. You know, on that kind of money, it was going to be pretty good. But that's completely fallen off now. The athletics is down a little bit, about 16,000. And then gate receipts, we're not charging gate receipts because we're not having fans attend, or it's limited fans that attend. And then building rental, we're not renting any of the buildings. The only thing we are renting is Eastman. So unless that changes, we're taking the conservative approach of wiping all of this out. So that's a total of about $467,000 that's gone. Then you get into the revenue from the state. Our numbers are lower on what we're reporting, whether it's free and reduced or our average daily membership. So that's $754,000. And then the Medicaid, we had hoped to be at $500,000, but with the inconsistency of the number of kids, we're going to knock that down to $250,000. Knock that in half. And then that is it. And I want to talk about what that impact is of if you took these and that's it and just accepted it. I'm going to show you what that impact means. One thing I will highlight though, that's in black and white. If you look under state aid, it says special education aid. We're getting an additional $175,000 than what we budgeted, which is a rarity when it comes to that, because usually it's a percentage of a percentage. And then there's some additional aid for special ed for charter schools that are serviced, an additional $23,000. So that is where we sit on the revenue side of the budget at this point so far. Let me go to, I'm going to go to the next slide. So now the impact from a tax standpoint. If you look at the FY20, tell me this thing is not, oh, am I in the wrong slide? I think I might be in the wrong slide, sorry. The FY20, which is the current rate that's set on your taxes now, is total, for the education portion, the local is $13.26 and the state is $2.05 for a total of $15.31. The budget that you passed on April 13th would have brought that budget up 12 cents or 0.78. So it would have went from 13.26 to 13.44 per thousand on the local, and the state was going to go down to $1.99 or 2.93%. So the net effect is a 12-cent increase or a 0.78% increase in the tax rate. If all these changes that are in yellow that happen and the black, everything gets absorbed that we showed you here on the revenue side, without starting to touch expenditures yet, the tax rate would go up 24 cents. So you'd go from 13.26 currently to 13.68 or 3.17%. The state rate, again, I can't control that. That is what it is. That's gonna be static. So your total combined rate is 1567, or a 1.57% increase, or a 24-cent increase. Now, what that means on a $250,000 home, instead of and the sheet that I handed out to you, this revenue sheet, you look on the back page, the very last page, you see at the top, the $15.43, and then the $15.67. If you go all the way down to the bottom before it starts food service fund, see the $30 and $90? On a $250,000 home, it's roughly a $30 increase on the budget you passed if everything stayed what we had said on April 13th. If we absorb these adjustments, and again, it's also all contingent, that's why we're waiting for the valuation, it would go up $60 to $90 increase. Okay? But you see, for every 1% increase in the tax rate, that's a $596,000 or $599,000 adjustment. So keep those numbers in mind when I show you FY22. So basically $600,000 for every 1% on the tax rate. Okay? Any questions with that so far?
So, Jack.
Yeah.
To boil this down for people watching and stuff, you know, we passed our budget, we're in there. We've had a lot of expenditures, the whole school year has changed. And as we are looking at it right now, instead of a 0.78% increase, which is what we had passed, we're now looking at a 1.57% increase.
That's if I just take
We
what
don't-
I know is gonna happen,
Happen.
what I anticipate happening, and I do nothing on the expenditure side.
Okay.
The thing we have to start beginning to think about is, okay, well, if these programs aren't running, there's savings,
Yes.
okay? There's that component of it that we need to start evaluating, but we don't have the kids all back into the buildings yet. This is just a quick snapshot. That's why you're gonna see when you get the recommendation, it says recommendation discussion. Because I don't really wanna say to you, all right, let's just take this and go and run with it. I think there's some more fine tuning that we need to do. We need to take a closer look at things, get the kids back. We got another 30 days before, within these next 30 days, we'll hopefully have the kids back. We'll have the valuation from the city, and we can see, is there one-time things in these that we could use trust funds, or that there's savings that we can make and say, you know what, let's go with what we've passed, see where the valuation comes in. We might wanna say, let's keep the rate somewhat steady. Clint, if you remember this, my first year it came in, the valuation came in great. We went negative on the tax rate, and we paid for it for 2 years after that, and over 4.5% increases. So we don't want it to go up too much, but we don't wanna just say everything goes back, because, you know, it's kinda like, kiss me now, smack me later, because you give them the little gift this year, and then next year, which is gonna be very difficult, you know, it goes down 30 and up 90, they're gonna go, well, what'd you do that for, you know? So
Do you
that's,
have any indication on what the rate, the valuations are gonna be?
I don't.
Not even a clue?
I think the residential is what's helping.
Yeah.
The commercial is the tough part, and that's obvious. I mean, you see hotels closed and everything. So, but the commercials usually, you know, seems to be more weighted. I've always, at least in the discussions, what I remember in the joint city school board meetings has been, you know, the commercial,
Yeah,
you know, with the mall, that's pretty much bottomed out at this point.
yeah.
You know, but it takes a big chunk, and we're trying to be cognizant of that as well. So, all right.
And Jack, the reason I brought up that too is there's still a lot of uncertainty that you don't have. I mean, I think you've done a great job here. I appreciate your estimates with regards to the heating costs, but if we have a very cold winter, those heating costs could move, you know, much higher than that. So there's still a fair amount of uncertainty lying in this that we need to account for as well.
That, you have that, but I also I wanna be cognizant of the political will you took in putting that 2.1 million away. We didn't put that away lightly,
No.
to say, you know what, if you're gonna put it away, use it, but you know, how do we throttle it correctly? And that's what I'm trying to project. The other part is the food service fund. I mean, I showed you that one number.
Right.
Then that was only, you know, March, April, May, and half of March, and June we're out. So what does that look like? Which is my next slide as far as what are reimbursements and the number of meals we sell, you know, what we're running at typically versus what we're down to now. And we just got to come up with a way of figuring out how can I project that out for the year to say, what is our potential risk there? But, yeah, a lot of moving parts.
Food service is basically all give and no take, right? I mean, we're putting out a lot of food for good reasons.
Yep.
But we're not making any money.
No.
Not this year.
Not this year.
Don't we get reimbursed for the, free and reduced?
Free and reduced.
We do. I'm going to show you. I'm going to move on to the
Okay.
next slide if that's all right.
Sure.
Sure.
All right. So for the food service fund, just to give you a quick snapshot on the number of meals. In October 2019, all right, so we're a month into school, we sold 57,259 meals over a 22-day period. That's a 22 operating day month. So on average, we're doing 600 breakfasts a day and 2,002 lunches. So averaging about 2,600 meals a day. This past May, when we were kicked out of school, we did 27,609 meals. Now you might ask, why is the numbers both the same? It's because we gave every kid a lunch and a breakfast. Okay? They got 2 a day. And that was 20 operating days. We averaged 460 breakfast and 460 lunches for a total of averaging 920. So, you know, you're down, 1,700 meals a day. Now, September, as of September 25th, we did 6,920 breakfasts and 8,434 lunches. And why is that? Because we got kids in the building, so that's why we're having that differential now. Because we give every kid when we deliver a breakfast and a lunch, but what's in school depends on what they take. So that's why we're starting to see those variations. But we're at about 1,023 meals a day at this point. So it's still low, but now you start to get the wave of kids coming back in, we should start to see those numbers move up. And the question is, you know, how much of a loss is there gonna be? You know, it's tough to say that we would break even because of the supply costs and packaging everything. We're not doing trays, but we're down 6 employees. 4 that have not come, 3 have not come back, open positions. 1 was we let go, and 2 that may not come back. So we did reduction of position, but we have consolidated, and we are not running as of right now the Beaver Meadow kitchen and the Krista McCullough kitchen. But that may switch, and we may put Abbott Downing over at Krista McCullough. That's a new head cook there, and there's some good coordination and training going on.
So just to clarify for anybody watching at home, even though we are not operating those kitchens, we are still providing meals for all of those students, and we'll continue to provide meals for all the students. We're just supporting it from a remote kitchen, correct?
And everything is packaged, and they're also offering heated meals, and you can also go online on the website and pre-order the meal. They're getting a lot through there, which is more. I never thought that was going to be too many, but we envisioned in buying it, and we purchased that with CARES funds in anticipation that you'd have multiple avenues to be able to put in an order for food, whether you were there or whether you were at a drop-off, because on the transportation site it lists out where you could pick up food, or you can online order, and it will tell you based on what your address is where you can pick up your order from. So it's we're not DoorDash, but you know we're at least offering it. But the other piece is when we come back fully, potentially offering when there's athletics, you could offer prepared meals, field trips. Parents are like, I don't feel like making a meal for tomorrow. You can go online. As long as it's done by a certain time, we'd have it available. So we're also looking at the future use of that. On the bagged item. So.
And we're receiving revenue for those meals.
Yeah, I'm a next piece.
Thank you.
So right now, what I showed you there was what's called the seamless summer option under the National School Lunch Program. That the federal government, USDA, kicked that in. And what happens is you get a flat amount for every meal, and you don't need to know who the kid is. Doesn't matter whether paid, free, reduced, doesn't matter. So you can see in October 2019, this was our reimbursement rate that we received for breakfast, for paid, and what we get for a lunch. That's the reimbursement rate. Obviously, at the high school, it's $350. Runlet's $275 for lunch and $250 for lunch at the elementary. So this is in addition to what we receive depending on their status. But when you're under the seamless summer, it doesn't matter what their status is, but what's important, get those free and reduced lunch applications in, because that affects our grants. But the and the 348, we just get that. We report the number of meals, and that's what we're getting.
So that brings up a concern I have is when students are in the school, we really put a push on to make sure that their parents put in the applications for free and reduced lunch. It's a big driver of money coming into our school from the federal government. We're entitled to it, but you gotta apply.
Correct.
How are we doing this year? Because people aren't around, do we have a problem with free and reduced lunch applications, and what can we do to influence? It's money that we deserve, it's money we need, how do we get it?
So there's a number of things going on. One is we take the direct cert list from the state, and we import that into that system, and that takes off. The number this year was about 565. Last year was 704 kids, so that has dropped off. But that takes those kids out, because once you're on the direct cert list, you don't need an application. You're all set. We also blast out the application. We have it online available. We're working with the staff currently to reach out to those students and sending staff out on the buses. And we also have staff with laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots to go into the neighborhoods and help them fill out applications if they need to.
Great.
So the last operating day, I believe, that the benefit, before the benefit expires, is the 21st of October. But we're working every day to try to get that, because that's what the entitlements are key. People think, and that's just the problem now. Whether they're in school or remote, they're all getting the lunch for free. And it's going, why do I got to fill that out if I'm getting it? So that's the uphill battle you have right now.
No, we need to have parents fill that out.
They have to fill it out.
Absolutely.
We need to get that.
So all families should fill it out, even if they know that they would not qualify. It's really, I think that's what's different this year, is making sure people understand that. I did not understand that until very recently, so that's good to know the deadline. So October 21st, did you say?
Well, October 21st, the benefit, what happens is they have 30 operating day carryover. So if you were free or reduced last year, that status carries over for the first 30 operating days.
Okay.
October 1 is when we try to get all these things in, which is tomorrow. But you
Okay.
have a little leeway. That's when the verification things start.
Okay.
So the time is really ticking.
Okay, so anyone who's watching tonight, if you have not filled out that application, please go and do it right now.
Yep.
You
tell
can
your
wait to,
neighbors.
and tell you,
And
yeah.
Lisa Bennett will be blasting that out, and we'll have
Okay.
staff calling, and she goes online and updates it, and we send out a new list. So,
Great.
and I understand it's a lot going on, trying to open the school and trying to get this, but this is attributed to funding. And,
Is there a way that we can put a little blib on our website that will give
Well,
people?
we have that under the food lunch, but they also blast it out through the school messenger,
Okay.
and then we target those specific kids, and then Lisa also calls
think
those
that-
families. And then we try to get into the school, because they're the ones that really have more of the direct contact, your
Sure.
guidance counselors and things that might understand. You know, they get a message from us, especially if there's some of the new Americans, they might not understand what that is. So we got to get out into the field. It's a multi-prong approach, and it's a lot of work, but it's important. You see what
Yeah.
happens when the numbers drop, hence that adequacy.
This summer, when they met with the New Americans up at the park, they brought the applications with them, and they had them fill them out right there while they were with the family. So they had 2 evenings of that, so they did get a number of applications. But
Great.
Jack's right, it's really the outreach and it's the personal touch that really helps with that.
So,
But if anybody has any questions, or, they don't, they sat here and listened to us tonight, or read about us in the Patch or wherever, where can they get information if they don't understand it? How do they get to have help? Who should they talk to or call?
so they can either email Lisa Bennett, which is L-I-Bennett, Libennett, at sau8.org, or they can call the food service program at, hold on, I'm just pulling up the number. 2250823.
2250823
Correct.
and 603. Okay.
And
Thank
Lisa
you.
will answer. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
So that is, think, as we're 3 months into this and maybe a month into school, that is FY21 at the moment. Again, you see all the expenditures. That first report does also have the revenue in the bottom. I don't have the ability, this is what we use to manually manipulate to be able to say how I benchmark. I don't have the ability with the system that links with Munis. So now we're on the wide screen. So it's just, he had to run back to the station and he'll be back. So I'm gonna move on to FY22. And I'm gonna try to go down some of the things that will be affecting FY22. Well, you'll have 4 negotiations again with the administrators, custodians, transportation, and the tutors. You have 4 this year, 4 next year. New Hampshire retirement system. This slide is an updated one from what I did in June. But if you remember, I mentioned that I was concerned about the rates going increased. I talked to them and they said, that's a given and it's gonna happen. It's a matter of how much. So they published their rates in early September and I have a link to that here.
What was the rate?
It's going up 3.22% for the teachers. So it's going from 17.8% to 21.02%.
What's that gonna cost us?
$1,102,869 just on the current salaries.
Yes.
For every 1%, this is the number I showed you in June. For every 1% increase would be $342,000 increase. So remember I said that $600,000 number?
Yeah.
It's a little more than 2% on the tax rate. Well, for this, it's almost 3.5% just because New Hampshire retirement. Or 2.5, I'm sorry. Because 2%. 600,000, yeah, 1.2. Because that's 1.1. And then the non-teacher went from 11.17 to 1406, or a 2.89% increase. Again, current salaries, everything in the current year is a $251,000 increase. So you're a little over $1.3 million just for New Hampshire retirement without wages going up.
I was gonna
Or
say,
health.
that's just now, nobody gets a pay increase. If we get the pay increase, it goes up even more.
No go more.
And we're looking right now at 1.351 or 1.353
Mhm.
for
Yep.
$1 million of increase.
Not to get too much into the weeds at this moment, but are there state level conversations about that sum and that system, which it remains preposterous after all these years?
I have not heard of any conversation.
Wow.
Now, the issue you're gonna have too is, and I mentioned, I mentioned down in the city, is the city side, because police and fire also went up. I mean, all the rates are published right on their website, and they're the same for the next 2 years.
The same, meaning the same increase,
same-
percentage increase?
That rate, that 21.02%, so that jump, you'll absorb the big jump this year, but then it's the same rate, so it's not as big of a jump. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you're going up 3.22, but then it's not going up anymore for at least the year after that.
So this coming year, I mean, so.
FY22, your budget's gonna reflect.
So when we take a look at our budget in January, we're already looking without doing anything at over a 2% increase
Just with New Hampshire retirement.
for retirement alone.
Right.
So before we even sit here with our budget, we're already at a 2% increase in our tax rate.
Right.
Not good news.
Just to answer Liza's question, last year there was legislation for the state to pick up the partial costs of the retirement. They used to pick up, the cost of retirement,
Right.
up to
25%,
Yeah,
35% at one point.
35%, then they dropped it to 25%, and then of course they've worked it all the way down to 0, so it's
Right.
totally on the backs of each individual local. But last year they did have a bill in to go back to 25%, but it was defeated. So the legislators are still trying to do that because they know the incredible impact it's had on cities and towns.
Yeah, that's just a remarkable pushing down of costs.
And
So,
remember, they're playing catch-up with retirement because
Right.
they got into trouble because of the, you know, the growth of the retirement, the fact that they were paying medical expenses when people retired, that program has since gone, but
yeah,
because of it, they were in a hole, so that they had to increase all of these costs in order to keep it solvent.
Yep.
So we're still a good, I think, 10 or 15 years away.
2039.
2039?
75% of that rate is to pay for debt.
Yeah,
yeah,
so in 39, you hope that it will come back down because they will have corrected that problem that they ran into with the deficit. So that's a result of that.
yeah, okay.
I'm gonna leave a note to my grandchildren to keep an eye on that.
Yeah,
It's only 19
right?
years away.
So to anyone watching who doesn't understand the way our state education funding works, this is just one really great example of communities being forced to take on things that many communities can't. I mean, at least in Concord, we're not Berlin, let's put it that way, where they're laying off teachers and closing buildings and really just desperate because of costs like this. And something's got to give. Hopefully not us. Sorry, soapbox. All done.
So the next thing, again, Jim, you're talking about opening doors before you even see the budget, is healthcare. So we're looking at a mid-single digit increase. Based on, say it's 5%, you're looking at about a $475,000 increase. 475, maybe 500, roughly. And then enrollments, we're looking right now, we're down, what, about 130 kids? So how many of those come back? I will think not all. I'm thinking a good portion. I look back at my presentation in April when we passed the budget, and I kind of thought I was just a little bit more optimistic or concerned about adding enrollment, because then we'd have to look at staffing and all. But I think with the ability for some of the schools have come back fully, that has caused some of them to leave.
So one of my concerns, and I aired that out with the commissioner, is the number of families that have chosen homeschooling. Those youngsters were in our schools. They were part of our total student enrollment. Now remember, our adequacy money is based on student enrollment. So my question is, because of the pandemic and parents thinking the best alternative was to homeschool their children and keep them home, we've lost maybe 60 to 75 youngsters that way. That means to us, that's a loss in enrollment, and that also can equate to a loss in our revenues from adequacy. So my question to the commissioner of Education, is that's not fair, because then you're taking revenues away because parents made that choice to do that. So, I mean, you can go to the charter school and take classes, but we don't lose your number. But in this case, we do. So I'm watching that very carefully, because that's another chunk of change that affects our money.
Yeah, I was wondering if they might, I mean, they nobody's going to do it without a fight, but I guess I'm kind of wishfully thinking that they'll change the formula to account for this one really strange year, because if I know that they use the numbers from the previous year,
Sure.
so
Sure.
this time
Right,
next
right.
year,
We could get,
that's going to be a huge potential loss if they don't adjust things accordingly. All right.
And the other thing is that, on the face of it, people, I hear this frequently, we've all heard it, your enrollment keeps going down, your expenses keep going up. 130 kids, we lose money for adequacy, but we aren't able to, obviously to us, but not to some people, we aren't able to remove teachers, which are high-cost people. You're looking at about 10 students per grade level, which doesn't equate in any way, shape, or form to lose teachers.
Right.
So I just wanted to get that fact out there, that that's not something that, it's okay, because we can just take away some teachers.
Well, and our long-term fixed costs, it's not like you can reduce a building size or reduce the amount of heat we do just because we have, you know,
10
maybe
fewer kids in fourth
three
grade.
three less kids in one, you know, classroom or in that grade level. So it's, you
Yeah.
know, it's
It's just,
disproportionate.
it's just a loss.
It's a loss.
What date is the census based on?
What's that? Can you say that again,
Can you
Gina?
repeat that?
Sure, what date is the census based on?
What date does what date do they take the enrollment?
Their enrollment is the October 1st number.
As far as we know, will out-of-district placements change very much for the school year that we're in? Have they changed much?
I don't believe that number has changed much at all. Matter of fact, I just went over some of that information today. Donna and I were looking at it, but no, we haven't
Okay.
had an increase in out-of-district placements.
Okay, thanks.
I'll get you that number though for the our next report. I'll get that hard number for you.
Thank you, great.
Okay. Oh, I'm hitting my sound.
Close
Hit technical difficulty. I'm gonna speed it up now. Side, because their budget, we don't know what the growth rate is. We're gonna see, and their revenue, because they're gonna have concerns. And again, I talk to them at least quarterly, just making sure we're on the same page. We were both in discussion when I expressed what the board had done with its end of year money, in trying to stabilize and see if we need to help each other in some way. So we'll see. And today's the last tax day of the quarter for property taxes, so I'm sure they'll see what they look like for them. Again, the county, they're gonna have a budget and a revenue. On the state, continue to hear a variety of things about state revenue shortfalls and their concerns. The New Hampshire retirement system, as we mentioned. The biannual budget will also be in conjunction with our budget. But also, you remember me mentioning those one-time funds. So we had 38 million was divvied out to the school districts, but it was all one-shot money. That ends. I'm not highly optimistic that they're going to renew that. The only thing I believe that is stable is that they did increase the adequacy base amount, which I think is $3,702. So you times that by 130 kids, you're looking at about $480,000 if those 130 don't come back, you know. But hopefully there'll be an increase in the younger grades or people moving in, because there's a lot going on in real estate. But I don't know what their families or what they're moving in, so we'll see. Okay? And then obviously on the federal side, is there going to be any additional stimulus funds to help support the schools? Okay? I'm putting here, just trying to get a little ahead, the proposed schedule of meetings for the FY21 budget meetings to prepare the FY22 budget. This is a draft. I thought we'd hit you with this a little early, especially for candidates that are running. Wanted to spread that cheer and sunshine equally. Or lopsided, ones that are getting off, like, thank goodness. And the ones that are coming on, oh boy, what did I get into?
3 meetings a week, or 2 to 3 meetings a week.
Yeah.
For the month of
So,
February and March.
We'll probably have more discussion. It's just a matter of where, like, as you could see, I've put, we put the public hearings, one at Millbrook, one at Concord High, none would be here. Usually we have one on the other side and then one here, but we thought we'd have them in more open spaces in anticipation that things still need to be more socially distanced. You know, if there's something you see on here that you'd like to look into or elaborate more, we can do that, but we wanted to get you a draft out to start seeing this is what we're thinking, to pass a budget by the 24th of March and present the Wednesday, the February 3rd.
So Jack, in years past, we've had the natural gas conversion. That was a big deal. Before that, we had full day kindergarten. That was a huge deal. This year, we're going to be talking about all of the
The revenues.
all of the revenues based on COVID. We're gonna be talking about
New
the
Hampshire
increase from
retirement.
the, retirement.
Yep.
Um,
Because if you remember, the year you did the steam to gas was also a 2% increase in New Hampshire
I
retirement.
remember that very
Yep.
vividly.
And we tried to add kindergarten. We're up to like 8%.
Exactly, and
It wasn't
that's
happening.
one of the reasons that we
Yep.
Put it
held
off
our
here.
tongue. right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So unfortunately, in raises and staffing and population, if there's a decline of kids, we're really gonna have to look at these enrollments and what do we have for staff. It's gonna be some tough decisions.
Well, the class size is always driven, people ask that question, how come our budget doesn't go down? But we factor in our class size formula.
Yep.
And we've done it, and so even though we've decreased a lot of students in the last 10 years, we've decreased a lot of staff.
Mhm.
So when I explain that to people, they understand that we are making adjustments. So if we have an opportunity to cut 2 or 3 staff because of enrollments, we will.
Yep.
But if we can't, and that's hard with 130 kids spread across
Yep.
all grades, that's not gonna give us a lot of leeway in our staff.
Well, and more than that, this is, 78% of our budget is salary and benefits. We're coming up on a new contract year.
Yep.
So any increases in salary or additional costs associated with benefits, we have to put in this budget. It's going to have a huge impact because it is 78% of our
Yep.
of our overall budget. So at this point, we can't predict that.
Right.
And so it's an uncertainty out there, and that's what I'm getting from a lot of this. Thank goodness, Tom, you're right, we don't have gas. Our the roofs of our schools, we put all that money, we took care of that, and that's
So
good
far.
for
so
30
far.
years.
Yeah.
And we don't have any major issues facing us right now, other than the very major issue of this whole COVID pandemic and the fact that, you're planning on remote hearings and stuff in March, I think is a pretty safe bet because I don't see a lot changing. So, thank you for that.
Just one other point, you will get your enrollment report with all the information about classes and class sizes. And one of the things we're going to add some things to it. That's why the special ed issue came up, because I reviewed that. And so you'll get all of that information, including numbers of out-of-district placements, including homeless, including a guess on homeschool. So we want to make some additions to that report for you, but that'll be ready to be reviewed with you at your November school board meeting, if that's what you would desire.
Okay. And then I guess we're going to be paying more in heat because we have to run full out, but on the positive side, fuel costs seem to be maintaining a relatively low number right now, so we have that working for us.
Unfortunately, we're out to bid right now because our December contract ends, so,
Good.
yep.
Good.
So I've based these on the current one,
Good.
with anticipation, hopefully it goes down. Okay.
Well, at least there's a little good news there.
A little bit,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Well, it's not all bad. There's just a lot of moving parts, but these are, always these ones are the ones that stand out. And as we said, it's the operating budget's the most difficult.
Right,
Your
and we're
debt,
not gonna
when
save
people say
money.
the debt, I don't
No.
worry about that.
That's,
Great, it goes down.
yeah.
Liza.
We can manage that, but sorry.
Yeah, so I see that there are no actual numbers under recommendation discussion.
Yeah.
So we're basically, we have the budget that we proposed, and we have these revenue losses. We have a city number that we won't be sure of until next time we meet.
Yep.
So what do we have to figure out today?
So what I wanted to try to do was get a sense of what the comfort level is to keep the tax rate that you've passed around that level, depending on what happens with the valuation. So say, right now I projected, I think, a $23 million increase in real growth, or 0.58%. Say it comes in at 28 million, and the tax rate's able to dip. Do you want it to dip, or do you want to try to at least keep there, or let it go down a little bit? I'm trying to, as I mentioned to you, Clint, when we did that 1 year and let it drop, I think it went down negative 1.3. And it's very nice to do that. It's just knowing what's coming down the pike. How do we mitigate that? Just so I'm probably going to get the valuation in the next 2.5 weeks. I have proposed your meeting to be Wednesday, October 28th, which is your annual meeting to do it. I may change that to Monday the 26th, depending. But right now, I'm trying to go out as far as I possibly can, because I think they have to have everything over to the printers to get the tax bills out by November, for December 1. They have to have it, I think, by November 1, so they can start printing and getting everything out. So I know it's tight, but
It feels to me that the fiscal year 22 sort of speaks for what ought to happen this year. And just because we have some serious rough water in fiscal year 22, if we can keep things without going down this year, in other words, maintain our status quo, then we're being good stewards for the taxpayers and saying, we knew this was coming, and so we're gonna try and prepare for it a little bit.
now the other thing I will do, I will look at this and say, is there anything that was in here that was one time? And if we had to go to the reserves to be able to bring that in to offset different things so that we can try to keep that tax rate again flat or a little bit lower, if we can let it drop a little bit. Yeah.
There may be a time where it has to go up a bit. You know, I mean,
Well,
hate to
maybe
say it.
pointed that from the numbers we're looking at, next year could
Next-
be it.
when we're sitting here a year from now,
unless we see
it
some
may be
change.
that time. So I'd say, you know, whatever we can salt away and whatever we can keep from dropping, I would keep the status quo.
We did that when we built the 3 schools.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to not raise the tax rate because of this planning that
Yep.
the school has
Yep.
done. And so I think that listening to the reserves you guys got, I think you're ready to weather, I think we've got storms ahead.
Yep.
And I think you can do it, so.
I think that people in our city who care and know about our financial situation would applaud an approach that we're talking about right now.
I think the key thing is I just don't want to take any more. If I can avoid it, that's what I
Right.
want to try to
Well,
do.
Sure.
We'll do our best, but the thing, I agree with Tom. I think it would be, really bad for us to give people $20 back this year and say, oh, by the way, it's $400 more next year.
Right.
That will the wild gyrations really are very difficult and extremely difficult on our fixed income citizens.
I mean, this
they really
board-
can't adjust that at all.
This board and this business administration and administration has only certain amounts of money that are movable. I mean, we can talk about negotiations, and we can talk about, I can't really think of a whole lot more. I mean, other costs are fixed costs that this board, that administration has nothing that they can say about it. When the New Hampshire retirement system says you're going up, that's they're just saying, give me your money. And there's nothing we can do about that. I mean, I'd like to think that we can, but for the short term, no. When the gas prices go up, if they do, if the electricity goes up, if we get hit hard with a lot of snow, those are all things that we just can't do anything about. There's nothing that this board has ever done in my 9 or so years here that has looked like or even felt like we weren't being fiscally responsible.
No, Tom, and I bring up the fact that, you're right, that we have no say, we just have to pay whatever that retirement fund is. When we enter into contracts with our teachers and our staffs, we have no control. Once that contract is set, that's typically 3 years that we have no control over that at all. And I would go so far as to say, I'm actually want to credit our business administrator, because the thing we have been able to do is, keep an eye on markets, refinance our borrowing to save us millions of dollars whenever we can. The scary part of that is interest rates are so low now, and we've redone it once, we've redone that, there's not much more we're gonna be able to do in that in the future either. We're already have taken a lot out of that, so it's gonna be tight. We're gonna have to be very, very cognizant of increased expenses here, because you're right, we have only limited things we can control.
Right, and it's not paper and pencil. It's
Well,
not coming from there.
The other key thing is when you do have these kind of reserves, this helped contribute to that 1.43% rate you got for refunding the elementary schools and saving $10 million.
$10 million.
$10 million
That was $10 million
Yep.
saved, what, a month ago?
Yep.
We did that.
And for the next
You
20
did
years, you're saving $400-some thousand a year. So,
Incredible.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not a one-time shot of $10 million.
No. And that
To give
payment
that-
goes
Not to
down.
give that impression. It's a total of 10 million, and we're getting it as 400,000 a year, but hey, 400,000 a year is nothing to sneeze at. If I can save 400,000 a year every single year, I'd really feel like a productive member of this board.
And so you know too, that when they funded this, they gave me the ability to save more money up front, and I said, no. The way our logic is we spread it out over the taxpayers, so that as generations of taxpayers go, everybody pays their little bit. It isn't one that gained more than the other. That's why there's that even 400-some thousand every year that's in savings. And as well, as your interest goes down, that payment goes down, we maintain that 5%, you have a healthy reserve in your facilities and renovation trust fund, because you got 1 million square feet of buildings. And when a homeowner hears some of these numbers, they're blown away, but you don't have 4,500 youngsters running through your house. If you did, I guarantee you'd have some serious expense too. So,
Are there other topics of discussion before we wrap it up? We're a few
Well-
minutes over our time.
I do have a quick question, and that is for our community that would like to see these slides that we had on here. Are they available, and where are they available?
yeah, we'll post it in the morning, because when
Okay.
this is all done, it's after hours where we'll
Right.
post it. I'll put a slider in there and people can go and look at those documents. And I'll put a link that they can hit it and
On our
questions
web,
will come.
on our
Yep.
web. Thank you very much for
No
that.
problem, perfect. And then when
Yep,
we do
I've got a couple of questions.
Okay,
Gina, you're all
So,
set?
I can, go ahead.
No, do you have a question?
I seem to be the person who keeps bringing things back up that we keep saying we'll talk about later. Before we get to the budget meeting again in the beginning of the year, we need to bring around the question, because you know that the community and our good friend Betty will bring it back up again. We need to look at the sports that we said we would look at in the fall, the budget for the sport teams, and also the Bill White contract. Because everybody on the board knows they're going to come back up again. And the question is going to be, how come you didn't talk about it before the last minute? So is that instructional? Is that finance? Is that a joint instructional finance discussion? Where does that go? And when can we have that?
I would suggest that it's a joint instructional and finance. A holiday?
Sure.
Now, I don't know if you noticed, but in my presentation, I also put, because I figured it would be addressed prior, and then where's my schedule? Notice it says revenues, transfers, and fees, March 1st, work session 6. I figured we would have something prior, and we're gonna really hit it in that budget as well. So we'll hit it in
Yeah, I'm
November.
sorry, I can't see that, but.
Oh, sorry, probably because it's the sharing,
So
but
what shape does that take? Do we want to invite, Gina, I think, are we going to look at all sports, or are we looking at the one that came up last year and the year before, which was junior varsity ice hockey?
Well, the original conversation was about junior varsity ice hockey, but when we were in the thick of things about the budget, it was mentioned several times. Not that we're looking at cutting all the sports. I don't want parents to panic, but that we wanted to look at what budgets were affecting the most kids most efficiently. I don't know if anyone else remembers that conversation.
For
No,
sure.
exactly right. We wanted to look at all sports, at revenues associated with the sports, at costs associated with each sport, and number of students that are benefiting and impacted by that sport. You're exactly right, and we had wanted to do that before the budget season got into. We didn't want to be doing that on February 15th or March 1st or anything. We wanted to do that a little in advance. So you're
That-
right, Gina.
I think we also, if we didn't talk about it at that time, but I think we did talk about co-curricular as well.
Yes.
So our drama programs and
Yes, we did.
all of our club programs and those sorts of things. So I
We
think
did.
that. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Gina.
I also think that if we don't do it as a whole, then there's going to be conversation about, did we target certain programs?
Sure. Yep. So
I don't want to appear that we targeted, for example, JV hockey.
Right. Although JV hockey was one very specific one that there was some
Right.
degree of discussion because of the semantics of the way that the proposal was written in the minutes. So that one may bear looking at simply by itself, which we may be able to deal with more quickly than the entirety of the sports program and co-curricular.
Yeah, I think that the JV hockey situation gives us an opportunity to look at how new sports are introduced and how we should process and budget for them. But my memory is the same as Gina's, and I would propose that we try and have a presentation about sports and all co-curriculars in November. So after the new board members have been selected, but before those of us who are leaving are gone, because I think to have a meeting with some overlap of personnel, because this is something that I would have loved to learn about when I was new to the board. The sports and co-curriculars were a little bit mysterious. So if we can bring the new folks in and make sure they're really grounded in how that works, I think that would be great.
The other thing to keep in mind is that ice hockey begins to select folks, our kids, probably early on in November, if not a little bit before. So there's no way that we can, that I would feel ever good about pulling the rug on a program, just as it's beginning. So we either have to decide, can we meet and talk about that early enough so that we can get an answer to them before anything begins, because that's what we got kind of trapped in last year. Or do we decide that we'll put that in with all of the other sports and co-curricular and make recommendations on that a year from now? So, just a thought. No
Well,
need for.
As I remember it, we wanted a lot of the information on co-curricular and sports, and it wasn't that we were targeting or we're looking to try to cut anything, but everybody wanted to know the line item part of that, because,
Yeah.
The breakdown, how much do these things cost, just as an understanding of the budget. The ice hockey one came up more because of a concern and that it was originally presented as it's just like a zero-sum gain, and that we weren't going to have to contribute a lot. And I think there's a lot of questions still about the extent of the program and the cost of the program. So I believe there's still community questions as well as board member questions that we should address, and I think Tom's exactly right. You don't want to do it and say, okay, well, you've committed to all of this, and now we're not going to fund it. We want to be able to give them a clear sign. So perhaps, Superintendent, if you could reach out to the athletic director and start to look into that, I think that would be good for all of us.
Will do.
Thank you.
Can I speak?
Sure can. Sorry, I don't get to
Okay,
say that.
thank you. I didn't know if you could see my,
Oh,
And
sorry,
the-
there you are, David, yep.
okay. Just something I've noticed. if we're gonna assess the athletic department and their sports, we ought to establish some criteria, that we are holding, them to, because what I've observed is programs come up and they do a presentation of their own program, and we listen and we say, what a great program. And I'm being somewhat sarcastic here, but I think if we were to really look at each one of these programs and have a series of maybe 10 questions they need to answer or we need to get to, so that we have a true sort of an audit of our athletic department and for example, what sports, what are the costs? How many people are using them? What are the families saying? Are they still in demand? And what kind of demand is there? A number of those type of things, rather than just, I think we could be more specific and supportive of the programs by giving them a true assessment or audit of how they operate and how they serve the needs of the population, because I think that changes over time, like with any extracurriculars. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I think, Kathleen, maybe if I were you, I'm not, thank goodness. I would look around at some of the larger schools in the state and see if they've already done something like this, and see if we can not reinvent the wheel so we can get this thing in motion. Maybe Pinkerton's done it, maybe one of the Manchester schools has already done it, and just see if we can, we're perfectly capable of coming up with our own, but if it's already done out there, as Dave said, there may be, somebody's already done an audit or a survey of their large school district for this very reason. And if we can get that, either use it or adapt it, if you want my opinion.
Absolutely.
Okay. Other things before we,
Well, do we want to set a time or date in October for the JV hockey?
The only date that we have a full board meeting on that, and would that go to full board or would it go to finance committee?
well, if it goes to finance committee, or if it goes to any subcommittee, then it's a number of weeks before it goes to a full board.
It would have
And-
to be October and leading into
We're gonna be
November,
squeezing it
correct?
again. Is there it feels to me, and Kathleen, I'd love to hear your opinion, feels to me like it would be a full board, meeting, and perhaps have Steve and, coaches come in.
And we're talking strictly about the JV hockey at this point.
Strictly about JV hockey, as far as I remember, that was the whole issue was whether or not, the JV hockey was going to be self-sustaining, and that they would come back at the end of that first year and tell us what they had done and what they needed to do to go forward. And that was a part I think we missed, as I recall.
Well, and it seems to me that the time for them to submit kind of their season evaluation rundown was right when COVID began. And so maybe they just need a reminder to write us a one-pager on here's how the season went, here's, what we did, what it cost, what we fundraised, what you guys gave us, how many kids benefited from it, what's going to likely happen this year if
Sure,
numbers are
projection.
going to be down, and just put the burden on them where it's been all along, but they haven't come through with an evaluation yet. So let's get that first, and then maybe we can talk about whether we need to meet. I don't see having a whole board special meeting about one program that's costing about $3,000. That does not make sense to me. I want to get to the bottom of it, but I don't want to waste any more time. We've been going around and around.
Well,
I'm good with that.
I have just basic questions in making this. First, has that money been appropriated for this particular school year.
Yes.
So, what we're talking about is getting some information before we get into the budget for the next school year.
So,
So there's not a
There's
pressure
not a
to
time
get this
crunch.
done by October or November. It's just because they're budgeted for this year. But there is still questions outstanding from what I've heard, that would affect us for the upcoming budget, which we've heard tonight is going to be already some challenging. So they should probably look at presenting something to either finance or to the board sometime in the November, December frame, so we have it ahead of January.
do we have an instructional committee or a finance committee coming up shortly?
Isn't that on the 7th, Kathleen?
Well,
Yeah,
it's
we
instructional
have a-
committee, but
Yeah, instruction is
And
the
then there's-
7th. We've been meeting every
Is there one on the
other week.
21st? I have the calendar on that.
The instruction's kind of,
I didn't know if
beat
that,
up though, I mean, it's
yeah,
kind of
there's a lot
full,
of
right?
things in
Yeah.
instruction.
I mean,
so much for that.
Well, we got
I-
a financial meeting at the end of October that Jack has set up for for finalizing
Well,
the budget.
you have either the 28th or the 26th. 26th is open, the end of that month, so or I could tag it on the end of that. It's up to you.
well,
The
if
beginning
we-
of it, whatever.
can-
Probably
is
at the end.
how do we articulate what Liza just said so that we get what we need to have in order to have this meeting on the 26th?
Right. I think the first thing I need to do is meet with Steve, get a report, and get all the items that you mentioned in that report. And I'll talk with Jim, and we'll set up a time when we can put it into a meeting.
Good.
I mean, there's enough spaces in October and November for us to do that. And
'Cause
it's
I-
already budgeted, it's already anticipated for this
Right.
year, so really the decision is for you in preparation of your budget meeting.
Right.
And you have time for that, so.
Right, but
Yeah.
Gina's right, we do have a tendency to kick the can down the road.
Right.
and-
I
And,
did not know about that, and that was.
no, that's fine.
No,
Yeah.
That-
so I'm
So-
glad Gina brought it up.
Yeah,
So
so I'll
if-
get right on it, including all of the programs, and that's not a bad thing to do,
Yeah,
those are great
That
questions
just seems
that
like
you
something
have,
we
and,
should do every few years
I don't
anyway.
know what other schools do in terms of reviewing and auditing, it's always controversial when you begin to, touch sports and athletics, as you know, I mean, you know that.
But we're not doing it to anticipate
you-
any touching, we just wanna know the state of the state.
Well, and with the extracurriculars too, because
Yep,
I
I have
feel like, one of the conversations that comes up from time to time is, well, if we're spending this much on JV hockey or name your sport, what about robotics or theater? And so just to have a list, and because I know we have a very rich set of offerings for kids, especially at the high school, and it's nice to see those and see where the
And I
money's
think
going.
that there's still Title IX implications, right? I mean, if we have X number of hours in sports for for males, we need to have some reciprocity for females, am I correct? It always was that
Yep.
way.
That's true
Yep.
too. Yep, good point.
And like anything else that you have, any program information, we provide data. You wanna prepare your budget, you wanna know how many students, where are those students, what grade levels, and all of that. So we provide that, so you would ask for the same thing for this.
Yeah.
Jim,
So, I'm very comfortable with that. I don't hear Gina, but I know I'm anticipating she's still on the line. She brought up, also Bill White, which is appropriately, I believe, with the instructional committee. I believe both Dave and Gina are on the instructional committee. So I think superintendent, that should be something that is potentially discussed for one of their upcoming meetings. I don't want to speak for both Dave and Gina, but I'm going to throw that out there and hope they chime in on comment.
I'm glad to start looking into that.
So, Donna and I had a conversation about that today, about the contract, and so, I asked her for all the data, relative to out-of-district placements. That's why that discussion came up today, so that I could take a look at that and evaluate it. What kind of programs do we have internally that are cost-effective? So those were all part of our discussion today. So we are preparing for that.
good. And so we'll leave that in the
Yeah.
capable hands of committee chairperson Higgins, I believe?
Right.
Yes.
All
And
right.
I'll talk to Barb about it too.
Thanks. And thank you, Gina, for bringing that to our attention.
I think David and Gina have questions.
Seems to be my role.
Okay. I appreciate that very much.
David, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to point out full disclosure, anything regarding out-of-district placements is a conflict of interest for me, so I will not be participating in that decision-making process. And anything else that the board feels is a conflict, I'd gladly honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, David, for proactively bringing that up. Totally understand and appreciate your position on that one.
Gina, did you have another question?
No, I just, I do need to ask Jim about a potential conflict of interest with that as well because of where my child attends, and out of district placement, but, yeah, we can talk about that, not in the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up as well, and I'm always available to talk as well as the superintendent can probably give us some guidance on that as well, so thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order in a finance committee mode? Okay, hearing none, then I would entertain
I move we adjourn.
and I second it. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you.